Howdy Pillar was the proprietor of the only grocery store in the neighborhood of home. Despite his monopoly, however, he was quite generous, uncorrupted by the greed and hustle and bustle of the big city just down south of home. The caterpillar puppet was beloved by the denizens of home and was always available for a chat or a good joke. And whoever made him laugh even got one item for free. That store policy had been engraved in gold behind the counter, visible to anyone who entered. It was here where you worked, sort of. You were responsible for one very important thing, and they were apples. You lived a little far in the east of home on a large apple orchard. It was known for its surprisingly sweet and soft green apples and hard and sour red ones. Quite literally the opposite of what puppets usually expected apples to look and behave like. There was an important reason why this was your trade secret. In the world of puppets, the choice of something as simple as apples was incredibly important. Green apples were usually taken by puppets who stood alone, forging a path on their own choosing. More often than not, they were considered villains by the wider society of puppets. Red apples represented unity and friendship, so the polar opposite of green ones. Of course, this was mere superstition that had been deeply seeded into puppets' subconscious, and so this was really the only way stigmas could be fought. Well, truthfully, you didn't do it for your fellow green truthfully, you didn't do it for your fellow green enjoyers, but more for apples. This way puppets got to try a different flavor once in a while. Well, there was a reason you primarily sold to the big city. Hypocrites all. In fact, it was Howdy who colored your green apples red, and your red ones green, just before putting them on store shelves. If that had any meaning, you both didn't know. But hey, as long as they were out of storage and not rotting in the barn, who cares really? However, it was this apple trade that had been neglected these past couple of days. Howdy didn't realize at first, but his apple stores were running low. Truth be told, Howdy had a very specific arrangement with you. You had keys to his back rooms, and you were supposed to deliver apples on a weekly basis, without him interfering. The reason he didn't tell you about. You had just assumed that it was to keep the image of a perfect store intact. A perfect store that just magically got all its items. While the real reason was more personal, you had accepted it. But it was because of this lack of personal interactions that he didn't realize you had stopped delivering crates of apples for over 2 weeks now. And only now that he was putting up his final selection of apples, he got concerned. He had just finished painting the last green apple red as the town's painter entered. Howdy sighed. He had hoped it was you, just to tell him what was going on with you. Morning, Howdy. Morning, old fellow. Wally Darling beelined to the paint aisle of his store, while Howdy stared at the stack of apples next to him. Deep in thought. He was worried about you, yes. Your delivery's missing, that just hasn't happened before. And he felt guilty for not realizing this sooner. What if you died? Oh dear. Why did his mind go there instantly? Howdy? Maybe something happened to you. Or your uncle, Father O'Reilly. Hey, Howdy! Absent-mindedly, the caterpillar took one of the colored apples from the stack and looked at it. Why was he so concerned anyways? You were just a puppet. Ding dong! Something poked him in the side, making him shudder. Blinking, Howdy looked down at Wally. Are you alright? Yeah. What's up? Wally held up a bucket of red paint. That's wall paint. Yeah, have you forgotten I'm painting my living room? Howdy chuckled. Honestly, I thought you were painting our living room. Wally blinked. You mean like a painting, right? A painting of your living room, not painting your living room. Oh! Wally laughed, only then suddenly stopped. Wait, if you make me laugh, do I have to pay double? Howdy pursed his lips. He wasn't feeling like laughing because he was worried about you, but he couldn't help himself. Oh, that was such a dumb question. He exhaled after a few seconds, only to gently pat the back of his little friend. It's fine, Wally, just take it. You sure, Howdy? You seem a little out of it. The caterpillar inhaled. Just go. Worried, Wally scratched the back of his neck, but... Sure thing, Howdy. I'm sorry. Wally left without another word. Meanwhile, the caterpillar sighed, swiping his brows, promptly deciding to step forward and turning the open sign to closed, before changing into more regular clothes. A black turtleneck, a brown jacket, beige pants, and his walking shoes. He knew where Orchid was, so it wasn't a problem. Sure, Howdy may be a salesman first and foremost, but when he was worried for someone, he'd stop everything. Especially when it was... you. After all, the reason Howdy didn't like to be there when you delivered was because he simply couldn't bear looking at you without blushing. The man had fallen in love with you since your first meeting, after all. And your apples were just so delicious. He couldn't help himself. Your mere presence made him feel something he used to be embarrassed about. You made him feel like a man, a masculine one at that. Maybe because of some rivalry of the sexes, but around you he felt maximum motivation and strength. A feeling that he liked a lot. But felt as if he needed to hide it because of fear of rejection. In short, Howdy loved you from the bottom of his heart. And it had only gotten worse with time. The long walk to the orchid was just spent him thinking of what to say, what to do when he saw you, and scenarios, reasons as to why you might not deliver on time. Normally he enjoyed the silence of a long walk. There was just the road, the smell of nothing but grass and flowers, and the sound of gently waving wheat from the fields, occasionally interrupted by a buzzing bee, or the loud rattling of a lonely grasshopper. The shopkeeper's eyes were focused on the road before him, his feet quickly scuttling him forward. In the distance he could already see the first trees, the scenery quickly changing as he approached the farm you lived on. The gravel-covered yard with house, barn, and silo stood silent. Only a few chickens were clucking around aimlessly. Howdy's eyes first tried to make out where Father O'Reilly was. The puppet man was evil, to put it mildly. A tall wooden puppet dressed in black robes with a black pointy buckle hat and long, camped white beard going down to his navel. It took Howdy only a few seconds. The old puppet was sitting in a rocking chair, a gently smoking pipe in his wooden nutcracker-like mouth, yet he seemed to sleep. As he wasn't raising his trusty shotgun Evelyn yet, to ask what those goddamn townsfolk are doing there on his private property. Howdy gulped. The man was snoring on the porch, chair softly rocking back and forth in the same rhythm as Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Shaking his head, Howdy entered the farmhouse. It was unlocked, as always during the day. Inside, it was the same familiar smell of cookies and apples. He suppressed the primal, sexual, overwhelming urge of saying, in a jolly voice, "Honey, I'm home," as he entered. Gulping, he looked into the kitchen. A pot of soup was lazily bubbling on the low heat. Turning his gaze back forward, he stepped over a few colorful leaves on the stairs. You had invited him once. Once, before Father O'Reilly came home from a sermon in the big city. So he knew where your bedroom was. As he reached the top floor, he noticed more leaves. Quietly, he picked one up. It felt a little waxy, was pink and soft, clearly fresh. He held it close to his nose. It smelled like you for some reason. Strange. An impulse made him lick it by just barely touching it with the tip of his tongue. It tasted strangely metallic, almost like blood. Its bitter taste engulfing his entire body. Disgusted, he threw the thing on the ground, taking a step forward. It finally dawned on him. Where were these petals coming from? There weren't any trees that had this color. There weren't any flowers that had this color all around the farm. He rushed forward to the door of your room, his heart beating fast, before he took hold of the doorknob. Howdy gently opened the door, only peeking through a tiny crack. You were sitting on your bed, facing the window away from him. You were unclothed. Howdy's eyes widened. There were petals up here to his ankle. And even though you didn't make a single sound, your head shot backwards, as if you felt his presence. You only barely caught a glimpse of him. You were tall. You were tall for a female humanoid puppet. The cloth you were made of was orange, and you had little black freckles on your cheeks. Beautiful green eyes that, due to your condition, were right now a little bloodshot and swollen. A beautiful blonde mane that usually was held together by a red bow was on your head. The sunlight through your window illuminating your curves and muscular silhouette through the veil of your hair. Your nose was yellow and quite runny right now. The inside of your mouth a luscious red, your tongue orange, and your name as beautiful as the night sky, Jean Applebottom. You exhaled, a few petals gently falling out of your mouth. Howdy? You gurgled. There were flower petals filling your throat. It was difficult to talk, breathe, and eat. I was worried about you. He spoke, his face flushed. He had never seen you unclothed. And the fact that your beautiful hair was covering your body only gave it a mysterious edge that was hard to resist. I was wondering when you showed up. You're always so worried about me. You croaked. You turned around to face him, but the shopkeeper quickly closed the door. What's wrong? You shouted from behind the wood. The caterpillar's heart was racing. You usually wore very short pants and a red lumberjack jacket shirt that was always half open and knotted up to expose your midriff. Now this. He was completely losing his temper, and it was incredibly difficult to ignore the angelic image he had of you in his head. He blinked and then sneezed, a single green and blue-colored flower petal shooting past his lips as he did so. As exhausted as you were, you managed to climb off your bed, covering your chest with your thin, white blanket. You opened your door, seeing the coughing caterpillar. He noticed and turned around, his eyes almost falling out of his face, clutching your blanket with the light shining behind you. Were those wedding bells he was hearing? He opened his mouth, gasping, and you smiled, blushing a little. You have it too, huh? He couldn't stop looking at you. His ears were ringing. It was as if he was losing his mind, though in reality it was just so simple. You raised your hand, taking hold of his collar. Your hand was so tender. Gently he grabbed your wrist with two of his 4 hands. You were so warm, so soft. You pulled him closer into a desire-filled kiss. As your lips touched, you both could feel reality fade around you, creating a world where only the two of you lived, feeling as if time stood still. Your tongues touching, your kiss deepening. Without separating, he pushed you towards your bed, gently pushing you onto the mattress, crawling on top of you. Looking into his eyes, you felt his many hands caress your body, while you once again took hold of his face with both hands. Both your hearts were racing, mesmerized by each other's presence, lost in each other's touches, lost in each other's bodies. Thank you to the people who are supporting me on Ko-fi. You guys are keeping me alive.